Chief White House correspondent Jim Acosta, a lawsuit has been filed against the president and others in the Trump administration. Brian Selter joins us now. Brian, walk us through this.
This is a historic moment for press freedom in the United States. A lawsuit by CNN and Jim Acosta against President Trump and several other top aides. I can show you the statement that's been issued just now from CNN. It begins by saying CNN filed a lawsuit against the Trump administration this morning in D.C. District Court. It demands the return of the White House credentials of CNN's chief White House correspondent, Jim Acosta. The wrongful revocation of these credentials violates CNN and Acosta's First Amendment rights of freedom of the press and their Fifth Amendment rights to due process. We have asked this court for an immediate restraining order requiring the pass be returned to Jim and will seek permanent relief as part of this process. So what does that mean? Essentially, it means CNN's asking for a hearing today in D.C. District Court, today or tomorrow, sometime this week, to get a temporary order to get Acosta's press pass back right away. Then CNN will also seek what's called permanent relief so that this doesn't happen again in the future.
Brian, to be clear, is there any precedent for a White House revoking the press credentials of a journalist?
There is no case like this that we've found. I've spoken with multiple media lawyers about this. There's almost no precedent for a news organization suing the White House either.
Right.
But with regards to taking away of a press pass, there's very specific guidelines that regulate how press passes are assigned and allotted. Frankly, all past governments, past administrations have been very permissive about press passes, whether it's a Republican administration or a Democratic administration. President Trump took a very extreme action by stripping Acosta's credential with no notice last week. And let me just read the other part of the CNN statement as well, because it points out this is happening to CNN, but it could involve any news organization. The network statement says here, while the suit is specific to CNN and Acosta, this could have happened to anyone. If left unchallenged, the actions of the White House would create a dangerous chilling effect for any journalist who covers our elected officials. This morning, in the last few minutes, the White House Correspondents Association, which represents all of the press corps, has come out with a statement supporting CNN's efforts to reinstate this credential. Because, look, Acosta was the one targeted last week, but it could have been someone from the New York Times or NBC or the Washington Post.
Or in the future, right?
Right.
The president teed that up.
Exactly. He did that, Brian, on Friday. On Friday, with that gaggle of reporters, when asked about revoking Jim's press pass,
yeah, that's right.
He said, quote, it could be others also. This is a First Amendment case, a freedom of the press case. This is also a due process case. This is also a Fifth Amendment case because you laid out the procedure, the guidelines that have to be gone through before you revoke a press credential.
That's right. There's case law on this that goes back to the 1970s. There was a muckraking journalist named Robert Sherrill who wanted a press pass of the White House. He was denied access. This went on for years, but eventually a judge in D.C. ruled in his favor and said, hey, if you're going to try to deny access to a reporter, you have to have really specific reasons. And in practice, the only reason that's been stated is that the reporter would be a threat to the president. Obviously, nobody in the White House press corps is a threat to the president. And so that's going to be the legal argument that's going to take place in court. And I mentioned the top aides are being sued as well. It's not just President Trump. It's John Kelly, Sarah Sanders, Bill Shine, the head of the Secret Service, and the officer who actually took away the hard pass last week.
Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders said, the Trump administration won't stand for a reporter placing his hands on a young woman just trying to do her job as a White House intern. Various journalism organizations stood with Acosta. Huckabee Sanders reiterated that the White House stands by their decision to revoke Acosta's access.
How long are you going to leave Jim Acosta in the penalty box?
I think Jim Acosta is a very unprofessional man. I think he does this with everybody. He gets paid to do that. You know, he gets paid to burst in. He's a very unprofessional guy. Whether it was me or Ronald Reagan or anybody else, he would have done the same thing. Look, I don't think he's a smart person, but he's got a loud voice. And here, wait, David, do you mind if I answer the question? And as far as I'm concerned, I haven't made that decision, but it could be others also. When you're in the White House, this is a very sacred place to me. This is a very special place. You have to treat the White House with respect. You have to treat the presidency with respect. If you've ever seen him dealing with Sarah Huckabee Sanders, it's a disgrace. And he does it for, you know, the reason. The same thing with April Ryan. I watch her get up. I mean, you talk about somebody that's a loser. She doesn't know what the hell she's doing. She gets publicity, and then she gets a pay raise, or she gets a contract with, I think, CNN. But she's very nasty. and she shouldn't be. She shouldn't be. You've got to treat the White House and the office of the presidency with respect.
Let's bring in Ari Fleischer, former White House press secretary and a Fox News contributor. Ari, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Well, where do we begin? You've been listening to the show. You've been following the news this morning. It's a tough moment right now.
Sure, you saw the press conference yesterday, that the exchange that's getting a lot of attention. We asked Kellyanne Conway about that last hour. She was with us and said the following about reporters at the White House and the job they're trying to do. And you, as a former White House press secretary, you're very keen on this topic, so I'll get you to react after we hear from Kellyanne. Watch.
There are journalists here at the White House and the White House Press Corps who every single day try to do their job by getting the story. Others try to get the president. They shall remain nameless right now. I think that some people like to grandstand and be part of the story. There's no question about that. We hear that from other journalists.
It went on from there, but what is your feeling on this as you watched it?
Well, two things. Number one, there was no physical contact that was anything bothersome. You know, that was incidental contact, and I think that was a false reason for pulling his pass. But second, Jim Acosta has had a long history of being an editorial writer in that room, not a fair or neutral questioner. Tough questions, challenging questions are the job of White House reporters. But when he starts giving his opinion and using that podium as the place to do it, it's wrong. And that's why the White House did this. And I support that. I cannot defend Jim Acosta. When he says to the President of the United States in the middle of a news conference, it's not an invasion. That's his opinion. And if he wants to be an editorial writer, more power to him. If he wants to be a columnist or have a nighttime TV show to give his opinion, more power to him. But that is not the job of White House reporters. And I think the White House finally got fed up with him using his perch at the White House to give personal opinions.
Yeah, well, both have put out their reaction to that. CNN, the White House put out this statement: revoking access to the White House complex is a reaction out of line to the purported offense and is unacceptable. I'm sorry, so this is the White House Correspondents Association. Journalists may use a range of approaches to carry out their jobs, and the WHCA does not police the tone or frequency of those questions. Its members ask of powerful senior government officials, including the president. Such interactions, however uncomfortable they may appear to be, help define the strength of our national institutions.
Jim Acosta and the CNN correspondent's conduct when President Trump called on him at that presser. You were there in that room with President Bush. Was this different than the kinds of questions that Bush got?
Totally different. You know, it's one thing for reporters to be challenging, to be tough. That's their job. They do it all the time. It's another thing for them to use that room or the briefing room to espouse their personal policy preferences, their individual points of view. And that's what Jim Acosta has been doing since Donald Trump became president. And I think that, more than anything involving that physical altercation, which really was a nothing altercation, I think that is the rub of the matter. That's what's.
But then he kept on talking. Like I'm talking over you now. He wouldn't give up the mic. But at the same time, was it an overreach or a misstep for the White House to suspend his credentials? Because that shifted the whole spotlight from whatever Jim Acosta did or didn't do to whether the White House is being punitive toward the press.
Look, in the Bush White House, you know, what I would have done was I'd have tried to just take advantage of that moment and say, well, Jim, I hope you get your op-ed published in the newspaper tonight. And then on to the next reporter.
You would deflect.
Let them ask a question. I would deflect and try to use a little humor and try to make everybody laugh at him for being an obvious editorial writer instead of a neutral journalist. But the Trump White House does everything differently, and I'm not going to defend Jim Acosta. It is not the role of White House reporters to express their opinion. He makes other reporters in the room look bad when he's the one out there expressing his opinion, because that type of thing just amplifies onto everybody. The public hates it. Ask a question, ask a hard question. And you know what, Howie? What he could have done was simply, instead of saying the caravan is not an invasion, Mr. President, he could have said critics say,
some say, as opposed to I'm debating you.
Thank you, God bless you, and God bless America.